Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Talentful webinar. It's really great to have you here on this sunny day. Today we're going to be talking about a particularly hot topic, which is how to secure leadership buy-in for employer branding. So just to let you know before we get started, the session is being recorded, so no need to take notes, but of course you can if you want to. And if you'd like to ask any questions throughout the webinar, then please do add these to the Q&A function, and we'll aim to ask as many as we possibly can at the end. So just to introduce myself, my name's Kelly and I'm the Head of Employer Branding here at Talentful. I get to work with a number of really exciting global tech organizations and ultimately support them in improving their employer brand. So through data and insights, I gain an understanding of how our clients' brands are perceived, not only in the external market, but internally as well. And this then allows us to build informed, creative and bespoke solutions to improve their employer brand and support how they directly attract, engage and ultimately hire their target audience. So prior to Talentful, I've worked at high-scale e-commerce brands such as Net-a-Porter, Not on the High Street and Matches Fashion. And I'll now hand you over to my colleague Anthony to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Anthony and I'm a talent director here at Talentful. And I'm currently working with several high-growth technology companies across Europe, helping them to scale in with their efforts through supporting them with guidance on talent acquisition, including employee branding, diversity and inclusion, and their overall key processes and systems that allow them to continue to grow at pace, whilst ensuring they continue to hire the very best talent out there. And prior to working at Talentful, I worked as a global head of people and talent at several scale-up technology companies, including Sprout and Admedo. Now, let me give you a brief intro into Talentful because I'm sure we might be new to some of you. So we describe our service as flexible, scalable, and a bespoke recruitment for ambitious tech companies. We were founded in 2015, and since then we've built a 200+ strong team of talent experts who are committed to helping companies at all stages not only reach their hiring targets, but exceed them. From implementing proven recruitment techniques to process reviews, workforce planning, employee branding content, and diversity workshops. And we have the expertise to help transform your businesses. And via a monthly subscription, our experienced experts act as a flexible on-site extension of your in-house talent function. To ensure the best culture match and obviously to outstanding recruitment experiences for both top talent and companies. And we operate extensively across EMEA and the US with teams in London and Berlin, as well as San Francisco, Boston, and Austin. And that really gives us a truly global reach.
Okay, so probably just to kick the topic off, we thought we'd start with why is employer branding important now more than ever? So I think what's really important for leaders to know is that every decision they make for their company, especially during a global crisis like we're currently facing, really has the potential to impact how that company is viewed as an employer, depending on how they've managed it. So whether they've taken a people-led approach or not. And I think for a lot of companies, this has been quite a defining moment. And I think you just need to look at that classic example of Airbnb, you know, a business who handled COVID with so much kindness and compassion. And that approach has really improved their employer brand despite the redundancies that they had to make at the time. So regardless of the business, regardless of your business, every company's teams are or have been working remotely, and that's bound to have impacted your culture. So what I tend to say to clients that are quite concerned about this is try and look at it as an opportunity to really reinvent your culture, how it is now, what it might look like in the not too distant future when we start returning to offices again. Long term, I think company culture is also going to be really impacted depending on companies deciding to work in, you know, either a hybrid way or going remote first. So a really good starting point here is, you know, gaining a pulse on where you are now and implementing a really well thought out employer brand. So it's really important that your messages and potentially what you stand for as an organization in terms of your EVP and your values and your culture are represented correctly to talent that you're trying to attract, and to ensure that your message is always authentic.
Now, let's quickly go over what we'll be covering today. So first of all, we're going to cover the impact of employee branding. Then we're going to look at how to influence your leadership teams. And then we're going to look at where to start with your employee brand. And then finally, we're going to look at how to measure the effectiveness of your efforts. And all of these topics will give you takeaways and support you in having those conversations with your leadership teams about the importance of investing in your employer brand. So we've spoken about the importance of it. So let's delve into the real impact and how you can translate this impact into tangible results and data that you can obviously use then to discuss with the wider business, and then obviously gain buy-in to ensure your employer branding strategy is ultimately a success. So clearly, employer brand and talent acquisition or hiring is intrinsically linked, but how close? So essentially, if we look at talent acquisition and employee branding in the same way as we would look at a sales and marketing function, when your talent team goes out and outreaches to prospective candidates, they're in fact selling. They're selling your culture and ultimately selling your EVP. And they are in essence making a case for a potential candidate to leave their current position, the job that pays their bills and keeps their family safe, to take a leap of faith and join your company, which is obviously a hire. So the journey is similar to when a salesperson goes and reaches out to a prospect. They are selling a service, a product, and they are in most cases selling the USP with the desired outcome of purchase or subscription to a service, etc. So in most cases, they do this with the support from the marketing team to help create warm leads before they go in. And that's done normally through awareness and nurturing. Now, let's stick with this comparison and imagine that that same salesperson is selling a product or a new product, perhaps, without any marketing. Now, the difficulty in this scenario stems from the fact that you do not have any real strong narrative of what you can do or why you want to do it or the product benefit or what's in it for them. And this is the same obstacle that most talent partners and recruiters face when they're attempting to sell your company to a prospective talent without any effective branding. Now, as you can see from the second diagram, the talent acquisition process benefits greatly from the awareness stage created by employer branding marketing to effectively move a prospect through to the point of sale, or in our case, the point of hire. Because getting people excited about your brand, product, and your EVP helps that person apply or to engage in dialogue with your talent teams. Also, having a strong employer brand helps to solidify your standing as an employer of choice. It gives the candidates a real window into what it's like to work at your company, whilst helping them to understand what's in it for them if they join your company. And depending on the individual, that could be professional development, working with cool tech, cool products, etc. But by giving them this opportunity, you are helping them to make the decisions easier, and you're giving them all the information that's needed. It is therefore no surprise that 75% of active job seekers are likely to apply to a job if the employer actively manages its employer brand. Now let's move down the funnel to the engagement and nurture stage. It's not all complete at the point of consideration. This is because there are usually several options that a candidate can consider, especially if they're super talented. So to convert this person, we are again relying on strong employer brand, one that clearly promotes your mission, vision, and values. And this will help the candidate at this point to select your company over the competition. Now, choosing a job, if you would agree, is probably one of the most important life decisions you will ever make. So that's why we must ensure we are effectively promoting the difference factor, as well as promoting what's in it for them, what you're trying to do, or what the problem is you're trying to solve. This will help the candidate to make an easier choice by facilitating their own matchmaking process and helping them to marry their own aspiration with yours. Now let's look at how these metrics translate into real value for your overall business, and one that you can easily sell in to your leadership teams. While there's a few important metrics that employer branding can really directly impact. So when speaking with your leadership team, it's important to highlight the intrinsic and extrinsic value that investing in your employer branding will bring. Now, firstly, let's look at the time to hire. So 9 out of 10 candidates would apply for a job when it's from an employer brand that's actively maintained. So with that in mind, businesses are achieving a 50% faster time to hire rate. And companies also see real injection of inbound applicants, and furthermore, a better ratio of response to recruiter outreach on platforms like LinkedIn. Time is money, so the sooner people join your company, the faster projects can be delivered and revenue coming in. Now, for a growing scale-up business, this is very important because the quicker you bring the best talent into the business, the quicker you can scale your product and grow your business in line with the roadmap. Now let's look at cost per hire. So a strong employer brand really helps reduce your cost per hire by as much as 43% or higher, which is very significant. And on the flip side of that, companies with a negative reputation see costs at least 10% more per hire. So remember, each cost per hire can become more expensive the longer it takes for candidates to join your business, as it takes less hours to fill each open position. Now, better quality of hire. Of course, every company wants to attract high quality candidates in the market, and companies with a positive reputation as an employer receive more applicants who are better culturally fit and are 50% more qualified, which in turn touches on the previous three benefits. It reduces your time to hire and your cost per hire. And as with the example I spoke about earlier, like sales, if you have a good brand, the likelihood of good people coming to you is greatly increased. Now, finally, there's a value add from employee brand that helps to engage current employees and enhance retention rates. There is definitely a misconception that employer branding activities is all outward facing and focused on future talent, but it definitely impacts your current employees. Your employee brand must resonate with your existing staff in a way that they proudly agree what it's like to belong and contribute to your organization's purpose. Moreover, through their loyalty, they're organically become brand ambassadors who make more referrals and are more proactive in spreading the word of your organization. And nothing is more powerful than somebody going off their own back and promoting how much they love your business. It has an unrivaled sense of authenticity. And then finally, attrition rates is another big bonus. We've seen that a positive employee brand can support employee turnover. In fact, it can reduce turnover by as much as 28%. So therefore, we would advise, I guess, starting with these metrics to help solidify your case and invest in your employee brand with your leadership teams. Now, before we move on to our next topic, we're going to run a quick poll, and that's really to highlight why employer branding is so essential for your business. There are also stats worth highlighting to your leadership team along with the ones we just discussed. So please submit your answers via going to the poll. So the first question is, what percentage of consumers have stopped purchasing a brand after hearing news of the company's poor employee brand? And I'll give you a few moments just to vote on that. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I'm just going to give you a few more moments. Okay. Okay, so we'll just leave it there. Now I'm going to give you the answer. So it's unbelievable that it's actually 64%, and all of you actually said that, so that's really good. Again, this further highlights to leadership the importance of employer branding, not only on hiring and employee experience, but also company's reputation from a consumer's perspective. Now, our second question is, when making a decision where to apply for a job, what percentage of job seekers say the reputation of a company as an employer brand is important? And I'll give you a few seconds to answer that question. Okay, we're getting a lot of different responses here. Let's give you a few more moments. Okay. So this is actually quite a big one. It's 84%. Sorry, 85% there. So yeah, that's obviously something very important. And when great talent seek out for a new role, they really want to know that the company they're applying to matches their needs, including company culture, benefits, mission, and having a strong employee brand can really help to convey this message very clearly.
Okay, so next we're going to be talking about how to educate and influence your leadership team to really get them on board with employer branding initiatives. So just as part of this topic, I'm going to be taking you through 4 actionable ways to get leadership buy-in. Great. So, one of the biggest hurdles I have heard a lot from heads of people and talent is really having to overcome with leadership is around education, that employer branding isn't a nice to have, it's a crucial value generator in any recruitment strategy, and therefore it needs to be invested in. And what we've seen is that organizations that invest in employer branding are 3 times more likely to make a quality hire. So what your leadership really needs to understand is that employer branding and recruitment marketing impacts the profitability and productivity of your entire organization. So thinking about the 4 ways that I spoke about earlier, starting with outlining the need. So candidates are really driving the need to change, it's really driving for change in talent acquisition. So researching employers through more touch points and channels than they have ever before, and really seeking a connection with the brand, not just the job. And we've seen that candidates expect a much more personalized experience now. They're looking for strong peer reviews, and they're definitely looking for a more relevant, proactive employer brand and authentic content that really demonstrates the culture of the business that they're considering. So for TA teams, they really need to have a toolkit of marketing tactics and expertise in order to attract, engage, nurture, and ultimately convert top talent. And in addition to that, they need to be able to see the data that proves success in every stage of the recruiting funnel, especially how employer branding drives more quality hires faster. So when making the case with leadership, I think that we all know that executives make decisions based on return on investments. And one of the best ways to make the case for employer branding is to point out how much you're spending on recruitment advertising and the data that you're seeing on how it delivers leads, applicants, and ultimately hires. I think we know 21st century for most organizations, traditional recruitment advertising, so ultimately job board postings, just isn't really delivering much value anymore by itself, certainly. And that's why a more comprehensive employer branding approach, including things like email nurture, content, and social media is really delivering much better results for organizations. So you can really make a good case based on what your competition are doing. So things you want to consider here are who are the top brands you compete with for talent, and also who are the top brands you want to compete with. And by researching these organizations, so think about their career site, candidate experiences, employer brands, and social media accounts, they can really help you gauge where they might be winning relationships with the talent that you want. So next is all about having a plan. So, first of all, you want to be mapping your employer branding plan to your business goals for the next year, ideally for the next 2 years, and that will give your leadership a much better sense of how you envision execution and success long term. It also ties into tactics and strategies to specific objectives that you need to hit, and it's going to keep your team honest in trying to reach those goals. So the key here is really to recognize that an employer brand strategy, it needs to be nimble. It's about experimenting with messaging and channels in order to really influence candidates and build those relationships. The other thing to note is that employer branding isn't a buzzword. It's a skill that TA really needs to own. It's also really important to prove to your leadership that you're not shooting in the dark with random trends just to see what sticks, but rather that you're thinking through how new marketing inspired strategies can help you build a solid employer brand and strong pipeline of interested candidates to help you convert more into hires. And making the case here, firstly, you definitely have to understand your top business goals and hiring objectives. Then you can take a look at other companies at a similar size and growth pattern and what they're doing, how they're already succeeding in that space, particularly in employer branding and recruitment marketing. So some of the questions you might want to be considering here are, where did they start? What specific tactics did they implement to see the quickest wins? And what can you do first with your existing budget to prove the need for more? So I think, if your leadership is especially wary, what I'd recommend is doing a phased approach to really start out small, and that can help your case by getting small wins first. And finally, what I'd say here is it's really essential to talk to your marketing team. So while I definitely believe recruitment marketing or employer branding is something that should sit under TA, working with your marketing team to start will really give you, well, first of all, more internal stakeholders to have on side, but also a really good foundation for messaging and content. So next is about justifying budget. And the good news I'd say here is that you don't immediately need more budget to start employer branding. Really think about getting creative and utilize internal advocates. And what you want to really be doing here is shifting the company's focus from a job to building a brand. And if you're already at the point of wanting to gain budget for your initiatives, it's essential for your leadership team to see where you're already spending your money and what might not be working. So things you can consider here are quick cuts in job board spend, maybe LinkedIn licenses or agency costs, and that could be a good way of reallocating money to use on employer branding initiatives. So making the case here, 74% is quite an interesting stat, but 74% of interested leads drop off your application process before finishing. So that means that they've visited your career site or they've seen a job advert but never actually applied to you. So you don't even know who they are. So think about what tools or actions can be taken to really continue to engage with that population. And potentially a good starting place is a tool to be able to track exactly what is going on, so you really understand the drop-off rates. I think through how to make the most of your current budget by researching other organizations have reallocated spend to buy technology versus increasing their spend. I actually saw a really interesting case study about a company called Smartfly. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with them, but they're a Fortune 500 company. And what they did is they saved $600,000 on LinkedIn by decreasing their licenses from 31 down to 11 because they kind of nurtured their talent pool so much they were able to look at their candidates in their own database rather than relying on any third-party sites. So it just kind of goes to show that if the effort's been put in and it's really been focused on, that you can kind of save cost in the long run. Right, and finally, prove the results. So leaders have to know what to expect from the investment. So it's all results-based. And you have to be able to tell a story that will really demonstrate the financial or efficiency impact of your decisions on employer branding. And this is especially hard when you're starting out in employer branding and maybe you've not yet had those numbers to back you up. So what I'd really recommend here is try and find a way to test out small initiatives on your own. Get some really early results and then prove that you're ready to take the next step. So making a case here is start with a small change that can have really big impact. So something like rewriting your job adverts to focus on the candidate. So doing an activity like that takes no money at all. Arguably it does take your time, but it doesn't actually take much money. So rewriting all of your job adverts could really impact the moment of truth for a candidate, and it will be the final push toward the decision to apply or not. So another case study that I've seen is of an organization who did just that over a period of 2 months and saw 290% increase in their talent network opt-in to stay in touch through future content via their ATS. So just making that small change made a really big difference, and they were able to nurture a lot more people within their talent pools. And if you bring a small initiative like this to your leadership team, it definitely makes the case on its own for candidate-focused content like videos, employee testimonials for social content and social strategies. So to help justify investing your time and strategy on employer branding, really lean on looking at case studies or presentations from organizations or even TA leaders in your industry to help show your leadership the kinds of results that they can expect you to deliver. Okay, so what's driving your need for employer branding, so your business's need for employer branding? So this is really a question that only you can answer, and I would say that this isn't a one-size-fits-all response. Some businesses are really cost-aware, while others are more focused on the speed of hire at any cost. So often when we partner with clients who are considering working with us, we always want to explore, what are the challenges when it comes to hiring. And they all tend to be very similar responses. So I'm going to list them now, and you may well recognize these from your own business. So the first area is speed of hiring. So we're often hearing that companies can't just hire people fast enough, especially in a very competitive market. It's really hard to stand out. Quality of hire, so businesses can't seem to attract the right talent in the market, and they're often losing quality candidates to more well-known brands. And finally, cost per hire. So typically we're in conversations with companies when they've reached a point of having to outsource their recruitment to us or another third party, or they have to hire more people into their recruitment teams in order to hire faster. And these are all areas that employer branding can have a profound impact on recruitment delivery and really enhance the efforts of recruiters and the efforts that they're already making. Great. So as Anthony mentioned before, there's definitely a misconception that recruitment delivery and employer branding are two separate things, when actually for a recruitment function to be working at its optimum, they need to work together to get the best possible results. So here's just an outline to share, well, firstly with you, in case you're not familiar with it, but also something to show your leadership team of how employer branding and delivery ultimately tackle the same problem, but differently, and how it then changes the narrative when they're working together. So employer branding activity focuses on drawing talent inwards, so actually attracting people to your business, where recruitment delivery focuses all on outreach. So your delivery teams typically are going to market, doing their in-mails. It's all about external, outreach basically. But what it means when they work in unison is that teams are able to really cover all bases, and they have a much more well-rounded and strategic approach to their recruitment efforts. Then the other thing to remember is that employer branding activity gets medium to long-term results. So it's not a quick fix overnight piece. It is a marketing piece, and it takes time to get results. Whereas delivery is much shorter and medium term, but obviously can be longer term too, depending on the scale of the recruitment challenge. So employer branding, when done well and consistently, to build a brand that is more well known, that talent can really connect with and can result. And what ultimately it results in is the next hiring spike being a lot easier to manage, as talent are a lot more aware of the brand, they're more engaged, and they actually want to work at your organization. So by that stage, you've got a much more engaged pool of talent to tap into, rather than the next hiring spike going externally to the market again. So in tangible terms, how does employer branding enhance all the efforts that recruiters are already doing? So if we take speed of hiring as an example, strong employer brand is twice as likely to be linked to job consideration compared to a strong company brand. When an employer brand is actively maintained, businesses are achieving a 50% faster time to hire rate. And for recruiters specifically, this really creates a much better ratio of response to in-mail outreach. So meaning that they have much warmer leads, whether active or passive, and hopefully they're not having to sell and explain the brand or the business to the extent that they would without employer branding. So the next one is quality of hire. So companies that consistently focus on their employer brand tend to receive more inbound applicants and attract talent who are a much better culture fit and 50% more qualified. And finally, retaining engaged talent. So naturally, hiring much better quality candidates means having more engaged and productive employees. And these individuals will then go on to be more loyal. They're organically going to become brand ambassadors who will make more referrals and actively support your mission of spreading the word of your organization through content sharing, being more proactive in attending events. And finally, we know a positive employer brand can reduce employee turnover by as much as 28%. So just to conclude this section, and just to ensure you feel comfortable and confident going into a meeting with your leadership team, we just wanted to share some top tips or ideas to consider to make the best impression and to come out having achieved what you're looking for, which is ultimately buy-in and ideally budget where necessary. So the first tip is make sure that you do your research in advance. So you go into your meeting really armed with all the data and insight that you need, and I'd say this is really crucial. So your leadership needs to see the lay of the land of where your business is at the moment, and they need to really able to understand the gaps that you're trying to bridge and why. So what is the impact that you're trying to make? The second tip is avoid your leadership doing any of the heavy lifting. So make sure that you're able to outline the goals that you have for employer branding and how you plan to get there. So ultimately, what is your recommended solution? The third one is be prepared. So where possible, try to preempt questions and challenges that you may come up against in the meeting and have backup responses. So even if you can do some of this in advance, going to speak to the stakeholders that you're going to meet and actually saying, what are the kinds of things that you'd want me to be answering in this meeting, or what are the things that you have concerns about, so I can come prepared with those responses. Obviously, you're not going to have every single answer down pat, so don't panic if you don't have the answer. It's definitely okay to say that you don't have the answer now, but you'll go away and do some research and find that out for them. And finally, I'd say probably the most important part of the conversation is be very clear about what you need in order to be set up for success. So, I think all of our leadership teams are incredibly busy, so it's really hard to get time with them. So, for the person that you're speaking to, the group of people, they're only going to be able to help you or give you what you're asking for. So be super clear about what you need.
Cool. So where do you start with all of this? So I would say whether you're a 20-person startup or a growing scale-up, it can obviously be quite a feat to really map out where to start. So what I'm going to do is just really talk about how you can set yourself up for being effective, regardless where you are on your journey. So the first step or the first stage is understanding who you are as a business. So know your corporate company identity, what you stand for, and what your purpose is. So employer branding really encapsulates the mission, vision, values, and on top of this, authenticity. Helps you to tell your story. And I guess the key point here is to make sure that all really aligns with the company's core principles. And then the second step is I guess, understanding what people really think of you. The key to understanding what the overall view is of the brand. But the obvious caveat is that, if you're a new business, that might not be quite possible. However, regardless, if you are just starting or you are a big brand, it's important to get that information. And that can be done by conducting surveys, and then really just gathering information throughout every part of the employee lifecycle. And you can do this using polls and pulse surveys, or even one-to-one focus groups. And I guess the third step is really beginning to articulate what it is that sets you apart from the competition, i.e. why here and not there. And you can do that through branding campaigns and using this story to begin to create a content showcasing who you are and why you are different. And it's also key to create content whilst understanding the personas you're trying to target, to ensure that there's enough contextual relevance. And remember, the employees are the biggest brand ambassadors, so getting them to partake is paramount. And then the final word of what I'll say about this is building content and putting things out there can be quite scary. And obviously you're not going to get it right every time, or even most of the time when you're just starting out. So that's why you need to understand what you're trying to achieve through every piece of content, so you can really measure out the key performances of that. And i.e. that means, is this content to educate, or is this content to inform, or is it a call to action?
Great. So that moves us nicely on to measuring the effectiveness of your employer brand. And I definitely say here there are multiple ways to measure your employer brand. You know, what is measured is completely different company to company, just depending on what your individual challenges are and what your key focuses are as well. So for some organization, cost isn't as important as speed of hiring, as an example. So measuring success can be a bit of a minefield, and often people don't know where to start when it comes to measuring their employer brand and how to prove their return on investment. So the first thing you need to start with is really decide on what your employer branding goals are. So there's no universal one-size-fits-all answer to this. It's going to be completely unique depending on where you are in your journey and what you're trying to achieve. So this therefore informs the metrics you're measuring and what qualifies as success for your company. So here are just some examples of how you can go about measuring your employer brand. So below is just a list of metrics that you could consider using, and I've split these into external and internal metrics. So the first one is cost per hire, time to hire, offer acceptance rates, and candidate satisfaction. From an internal perspective, you could be looking at, your higher quality of talent, and you can kind of map this through performance. So people coming into your organization, how well are they performing? Are they passing probation? That kind of thing. Increased employee referrals. So people that are coming into your organization, are they really enjoying it? And therefore they are making referrals. Employee experience, and also employee engagement and attrition rates as well is another good one to start measuring. So what I'd say here is I'm not suggesting that you start measuring everything at once. As I say, these need to relate to your goals, and it's much better to start with 2 to 3 initially and then keep them really focused rather than taking a scattergun approach and trying to tackle everything at once. So I would say you can work this out by really analysing the data that you already have, or aim to get the data you need to make the decision more concrete. I appreciate that this is very basic, but this is just an example of where and how you can start working through and collating your data. And this really allows you to start, well, obviously it gives you a starting point that you're able to assess over time to see the impact of your employer branding efforts. And it's a really great way to assess what needs to be focused on, what's working, where tweaks can be made and changes need to be made. And it's also a really great and consistent way to show your leadership team how your data is changing over time through your efforts.
So to wrap up today, we just want to recap on the key takeaways from the session. So first, use data to your advantage as it helps to articulate your argument and gain buy-in from the leadership team. Be clear and consistent of the challenge you're trying to solve. This bit needs to be clear when you come to the measurement of your success. And then be clear about the solution and what and who you need to get you there. So ensure that you know the stakeholders you need to help you to achieve the success. And then finally, update using key metrics. And not just key metrics, but also wins as well to highlight your success through the business and ultimately the ROI that you're bringing in through your efforts.
Great, so this is just a really brief introduction for those of you who are interested into our employer branding services. If you are interested in finding out more, then do check out our website or feel free to get in touch with me directly. So just to give you an overview of how we approach employer branding, so we always start projects off with data insights. We partner with the brand intelligence platform, a company called Attest, and we conduct an 8-week in-depth employer brand audit to really learn what people are saying about you in the market and within your own company. At the end of this discovery phase, what we'll do is provide you with a maturity level of your employer brand as a starting point, and then a really comprehensive report of what you're doing well and areas of improvement. And then taking this approach really allows us to develop bespoke and data-led creative solutions that are then activated through our in-house studio, helping to tell your story and highlight your unique culture, your values, and your vision. And here are just a host of activities that Talentful specialise in. So we believe that a combination of these products will really activate your brand and support in spreading the word of your organisation. You'll also get to work with our in-house creative studio, and they're all experts in what they do and super passionate about all things employer branding.
And if there's anything you'd like to talk through or find out more information on, check our website, talentful.com. Our employer branding offering can also be found under the service section of our website. And finally, please do feel free to reach out to myself or Kelly should you want to continue the conversation via email or LinkedIn.
Great, so that concludes the webinar for today. Thank you all so much for joining and for listening. Hopefully you've come away from the session with a few ideas and ways of gaining buy-in from your leadership. So over to you guys. I'm just going to have a look and see if there are any questions that have come through today. Okay, so there's a couple of interesting ones. Right, Anthony, I'm going to pass this one on to you if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So the question is, what else can I monitor to test the effectiveness of our employer brand?
Yeah, I would say when you're setting up your employer brand strategy, you can always test how well you're doing by how you're perceived internally and externally, by again making sure you're using those surveys and polls. And in addition to this, you can monitor your employer branding efforts by monitoring whether your digital promotions have been seen or engaged with. And as you'll find, I'm sure you know, most social media platforms, including LinkedIn, offer this feature and allow you to measure the effectiveness of your activity. And then that way, you'll be able to find the correlation between engagement of your content and the number of applicants you get for each role, for example. And we're probably going to have time for one more question. Right, I'll pass this one over to you, Kelly. So if there is one person in leadership who is a detractor from employer branding, am I better to focus on trying to flip them, or expect that not everyone will get it and work on getting the majority on board?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think the reality is, depending on how big your leadership team is, you're not going to get everybody on side all at the same time, or going to have bigger advocates than others. So I think it's about working on the majority, but of course you want those people who aren't as bought in to be bought in over time. And I think this is where data is so important and so useful, and making sure that you're measuring this success over time. So the important thing, I think, to continue to gain buy-in and an interest from your leadership team is definitely kind of reporting back on those metrics on a regular basis. Communicating with them with the types of activities that you're doing. And I think over time you'll see the people who maybe weren't as engaged in the beginning will start seeing the traction and kind of the impact and the fruit of your labor, really, and start to get more bought in over time. So that's what I would say to that question. Okay, so I think that's all that we have time for today. As Anthony said, if you'd like to continue the conversation, please do reach out to either one of us on LinkedIn. But thank you again for your time today, and we really hope to see you soon in another webinar. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.